What's going on, Warriors? Finally getting some good weather out here. So I want to dive in today and we're going to break down muscle building for type 1 diabetics and why it's different than non-diabetics. Let's just dive right into this one. If it's your first time on the channel, I help diabetics to build muscle, burn body fat, and control their blood sugars. But if you're not a diabetic, you like things like supplement reviews, we do amazing supplement reviews to help you take your health to the next level, baby. So make sure you guys go ahead, smash the subscribe button down below, hit that bell notification so you guys do not miss out on any information we are dropping. Again, we are dropping some crazy information that you will never hear from your medical community, information that they are not going to tell you. And this isn't a slight to the medical community because the medical community is doing some amazing things. But one of the things that they don't know how to do is to connect different pieces of the puzzle when it comes to type 1 diabetes specifically. So we're gonna do that here on this channel so you guys do not miss out on anything and keep you guys going in the right direction. All day, every day. Let's just dive right into this one, guys. I got you. Disclaimer all the time, I always have to say this, is that the medical community can do some amazing things for us, but I've been a type 1 diabetic myself for over 24 years, played at the highest level of sports that you could play. I've seen it all, and when it comes to understanding certain information, a lot of times, historically speaking, there hasn't been that many type 1 diabetics. And so doing a lot of research, a lot of people will not put the money, the time, the energy, and the money into research to understand type 1 diabetes and also build muscle and burn body fat, right? So it's important for you guys to understand that their main goal is to get your A1C in normal ranges, which granted, that can help you to improve your health. But you're so much more than your A1C. You care about muscle building, you care about fat burning, you care about weight loss, but you're not getting that information. So a lot of times, what it's like is it's like having pieces of a puzzle where the pieces in that puzzle box connect to other pieces that you don't even have in your puzzle box. And so we have to take these pieces, understand the different facets of type 1 diabetes, to then create our own puzzle piece to fill in the gaps. And that's what I do, and that's what we're gonna do here today. The first thing that we have to understand with type 1 diabetes and muscle building is insulin. Insulin a lot of times has this stigma behind insulin, which I get, oh, I'm gonna gain weight, I'm not gonna be able to lose it. And then we go into this fear-based mode where we completely get rid of carbohydrates, so we go super low in a point that does not help us to build muscle. Remember, muscle is one of the most metabolically active things in the body that helps to speed your body's metabolism up. So what happens when our person loses weight, but that weight is also coming from muscle? What a lot of people don't know that they need, but they actually do need, is body remodification, meaning we want to burn body fat and maintain muscle. So the question that has to be, how do we burn body fat and also maintain muscle? And growing up, doing physique shows and competitions, one of the things I knew is that as soon as I was dropping those carbohydrates, sure, I could lose a little bit of body fat, sure, I could lose some weight, but there had to be a line that I knew that I didn't want to cross where I was losing a lot of weight that was coming off my muscle as well. And this is how you wind up having metabolic issues down the line, because you're constantly breaking down the muscle, and now let's say you come off your diet and you're eating like crazy, and all of a sudden you come back around, now you gain more weight than you even started with to begin with, because you don't have the muscle on board to support that continued weight loss. Now we have to understand insulin when it comes to building muscle and the other benefits that insulin has. So we can kind of get rid of some of the stigma behind insulin too. So insulin is important for us in terms of the muscle that we build. It can help us to prevent blood sugar lows by shuttling carbohydrates or glucose into our body cells, which gets stored as glycogen. When you're having a blood sugar low, your body's gonna release glucagon. That glucagon is gonna trigger that release of glucose, which can help to mitigate some lows. So those lows don't become as deep as maybe they normally would be for someone who's constantly low on carbohydrates or doesn't have any on board at all for a long period of time. And so what we also see with that is that storage of glucose as glycogen will also, in study after study will show this. It's not even just me noticing it myself when I used to do my physique competitions and our diabetic clients that we train. But what you're gonna notice is glycogen helps to preserve muscle and help you build it. How it does this is when you train, one of the energy systems that your body uses is what's known as the anaerobic energy system or the glycolytic system, meaning that your body uses glycolysis, the breakdown of glucose, to turn that into energy to help you to train. And so that, in a sense, is what helps to preserve the muscle, because you bought the glycogen in the muscle stores to be able to utilize when you train. And so now we understand how insulin can shuttle glucose into the muscle cells to help to convert that into glycogen when it's not used right away, but then can be released while you're working out. And because you have that energy on board, that's what's gonna help to preserve your muscle and also help you to build it. So you're not constantly in a catabolic state of not having that glucose on board to support the energy system, like the glycolytic system. Probably wondering, why is this guy outside in flip-flops and sandals in the middle of the road? I just am, baby. It is what it is. You just gotta live your life. Live your life, guys. Do what you guys gotta do. Glycolysis, using glucose to help you to fuel energy in workouts. What happens when that's not there? Now you're leaving amino acids and muscle tissue more susceptible to that. And some people might say that, sure, gluconeogenesis, but you're not gonna produce as much glycogen as you would if you are somebody that's eating carbohydrates. And study after study will show this and the importance of storing glycogen for that. Another thing that insulin is gonna do is increase what's called your mTOR pathway. So just briefly getting into this, guys, and I'm gonna go deeper into this in future videos. But that mTOR pathway is going to trigger or increase how much proteins your body makes that are specifically related to building muscle tissue, right? And so if you don't have insulin on board, you're chronically low and you're working out at these high intense levels, you're not seeing anything and muscles coming off your body, well, you're not really utilizing that mTOR pathway the best way possible to help you to repair that damaged muscle. Another thing, we think vasodilation, we think increasing blood vessels to allow more nutrients to flow into the body's cells. You think about things like other amino acids as well, because not only glucose, but insulin can help to shuttle more amino acids into your body cells, the building blocks of protein, building blocks of muscle tissue. And here's the other thing that I wanna say again, going back to the beginning of this, is as a type 1 diabetic, you're gonna notice, I don't care what medical team you go to, you're not gonna find a medical team that's gonna talk about this stuff. Why? Because again, their main concern is A1C and control and management. It's not about how do you branch off now and build muscle and do all these other things. And the truth is, there's not a lot of research out there for type 1 diabetics. So again, we have to take the puzzle pieces, understand the different facets of it, and then fix it together to make an inference about something that's likely to be the case, right? And so we'll give you an example. When we compare non-diabetics who are on things like ketogenic diets, high fat, very low carbohydrates and no carbohydrate and moderate protein, to people who are on carbohydrates, study after study is going to show you that people on the carbohydrates are gaining more muscle, more lean muscle, than the people that are on the ketogenic diets. And they only do these up to 8 weeks. And what you'll also find too is some people on the ketogenic diets, they're gonna show you as well that they end up losing some lean mass. And a lot of these studies are done at 8 weeks, right? For non-diabetics who still produce insulin when they eat protein. And so we see that there's an issue here because at 8 weeks for a study, there's a lot of type 1 diabetics that have been doing this for 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, and not replenishing things the right way to help them to build that muscle. And a lot of these studies at the end of it, even if they say that lean body mass can be built, they'll also caution against it because of, one, the maintenance and being able to stick with something that's a high fat diet, a low carbohydrate can be tricky, and just for energy overall as well, a lot of people will just fall off the wagon with it. There's another study in particular that was a really interesting study, and it showed people, they matched people on a ketogenic diet versus a high carb diet to see what happened with the higher carb diet versus the ketogenic diet with muscle building. And they noticed in the ketogenic diet, no lean muscle mass started to be built until week 10. At week 10, they reintroduced carbohydrates and lean mass went up. So this kind of shows us, the introduction of carbohydrates. But what does carbohydrates trigger? Insulin. And so now we see the connection between insulin and those carbohydrates to help them to build more lean muscle mass, right? Because prior to that, nothing was happening up until that 10-week mark when they introduced those carbohydrates into their diet. Again, highlighting the importance of insulin, highlighting the importance of carbohydrates. Now what we do is we take this and we branch this off to type 1 diabetics and we say, okay, because there's no studies out there or very few that will ever document this right now, I'm gonna start doing this for you guys in the future, so don't worry. Now what does this mean for type 1 diabetics who don't produce any insulin at all? And what does this mean for type 1 diabetics who don't do this in a control-styled study and they're doing this outside, not counting their calories the right way, not counting the protein the right way, and now chronically low and overtraining all the time? What happens to their muscle tissue overall? Now you're gonna nosedive it and realize that, holy shit, how you're building muscle and how insulin responds in your body because you're not releasing it, just like even our people on our ketogenic diet who release it with protein, is just not the same thing here. So worker 1 with the Legos, they are somebody who's not a type 1 diabetic. Now with worker 1, they want to stack these buildings, or let's say they're trying to make a building, worker 1. So they stack their bricks together and the bricks go in easy because these bricks already have cement on them. And they don't even know it, they don't even realize it, but they already have cement on them. So they just kind of go and stack their bricks and everything happens. Now, type 1 diabetics try to do the same thing. But the problem is you're trying to stack your brick and it just falls off and nothing really ever happens because you don't realize that, like the other non-diabetics that already have cement on their bricks, you don't have any cement on your bricks, but you're still operating like you do. And so that's when you run into those issues. And so in order for the type 1 diabetic to still have an advantage at building muscle, they have to take a tool, slap the cement on the brick, and then stick it together. Now they are stacking their foundation to build some muscle. Just like that. Now it makes the process easier for our type 1 diabetic, whereas the shovel and tool they use is the carbohydrates that trigger the insulin, which is the cement, on top of the bricks, which then allow them to build a foundation of muscle. Now maybe you might have some slop, some residue on the outside of it, and let's say that residue that's left on the outside of the issues that you have are the body fat that might have accumulated. But you have a foundation of muscle. Then you can just buffer and trim the body fat off of the structure while still maintaining some of this muscle tissue instead of just obliterating it all together because you've gotten rid of carbohydrates. And that's how type 1 diabetes in how we build muscle is different than somebody who's a non-diabetic. There's other things we have to look at versus what a non-type 1 diabetic does not have to look at. Now, one of the things we have to understand as well is the insulin index, because that connects everything to what we're saying about this. And this allows us to make more inferences and drawing the line to put all these pieces of the puzzle together. So with this insulin index, studies have been done to show us that non-diabetics who are eating protein trigger an insulin response similar to having carbohydrates, similar to having things like cereal, brown pasta, for example, the things that we inject and give ourselves insulin for. What you're gonna find is that a non-diabetic that's low carb, for example, and maybe, or no carb, and they're eating beef, is still gonna have an insulin response. Remember the benefits of insulin for building muscle that we talked about earlier? So now they can still benefit from having that happen to their body with the shuttling of more nutrients into their body cells, aminos, upregulating of the mTOR pathway to create more protein, etc., to help to build muscle because they're releasing insulin when they are consuming protein, meaning they don't even need the carbohydrates to have an insulin response. Whereas for a type 1 diabetic, we have to say, what does that mean now for a type 1 diabetic who does not produce any insulin at all? That same piece of beef that the non-diabetic is having, they're not producing any insulin, whereas this person is. And when we can infer what insulin does, now we can have a better idea for the bigger picture of what we might need to do to also help us to build muscle. So now you think, okay, a type 1 diabetic, how do we trigger that? Now, the introduction of carbohydrates, which allows us to give ourselves an insulin injection, which then can allow us to have a similar response. So by pairing the beef, maybe with some carbohydrates, now we give ourselves some insulin that helps us to shuttle those nutrients into the body cells, right? And so that's about us looking at the insulin index and understanding that if you weren't a type 1 diabetic, you'd be releasing insulin anyway. But if you do take that same approach and you're working out and training, then you're gonna constantly, most likely be breaking down, there's a chance you could be breaking down more muscle than you want. You don't have the insulin on board to support more of the muscle building that the non-diabetic would. If you liked some of that information, hit that subscribe button down below, hit that bell notification so you guys don't miss out on any of these videos. We'll make sure that you guys are headed yourself in the right direction and you guys have all the cement that you guys need to put your foundation together and get things rolling, all right? It's Coach Jay. I'll see you guys in the next episode.